Hello, welcome to another vlog. This time I am reading A Witch's Sin, or the first book in the Neon Ghost series by Daniel B. Green, good friend of mine. So I am reading a friend's book again, and this time in a genre I'm very unfamiliar with. I do not read cyberpunk hardly at all, so I guess I should put that disclaimer out there that I don't know if this is especially tropey or unique or groundbreaking, or I can't tell you any of those things, but I can tell you if I like the story. So we follow a girl named Taya. She is trying to get her enforcer's license. So this world has a pay to protect system, so it's kind of like hiring the police to do things. It's not kind of like that. That's what it's like. So if there's a missing persons case, if there's this book opens up on them going after a potential probable pedophile, and this is all private pay kind of work that gets done. So already really horrifying to think about that kind of system in place. And the world definitely has that dystopian feel to it, where between the world building, between the structure of the world, the things that the individual characters have to go through, it's very much a darker haze over it. And actually, in this world, there is a haze that surrounds this mega structure that everyone lives in. So everyone has been forced to live inside this massive, mega structure that is made up of so many different floors, and each floor is like its own world, its own city. So Taya is on the cusp of getting her enforcer's license, and she really wants this, and her mentor Quinn throws her an easy job to help her get that last little bit that she needs to get licensed. But this job ends up leading her on this larger scale job, because she wants to see it through well, where she now has to explore this mega structure. She has to go hunting down this mystery, essentially, what happened to this missing kid. But going on with that, it's sci-fi and it's futuristic, but it's also dystopian. It's also very upsetting setting. We also have this infiltration of ads, where it's like ads are popping up everywhere. It doesn't matter what you're doing, even if you're sleeping, ads can come into your sleep. But then also, because it's sci-fi and everybody has wear, which is like tech that they wear on their body, there's also this added factor of being able to hack into someone else's system, get into their mind, which is just really horrifying. There's constant notifications from people, and you can detect other people and what they're doing. It's crazy. The wear can also give you enhancements, so you can be stronger, you can have different abilities because of the wear, cyborg type thing, as well as light you up, give you different color glow, because this is a very dreary world, so that's quite appealing to people. And finally, the very un-sci-fi thing about it, I think, is vampires. So there's also this whole there's a lot of social things happening in the world so far, but I think probably the primary one, the one that's most at the forefront, is that there's vampires here, and that they are looking for equal rights, essentially. These vampires have a history of bloodsucking. They have a history of attacking and killing humans, and because of that, there's a big prejudice on them, and there are many vampires that are fighting to be judged by the individual. Judge us by our individual acts, not by the wider history that we've had, which sounds great on the surface, but you also have the added complication of these vampires are hundreds of years old, so some of them will openly admit, yeah, I've definitely killed many people, but I don't do it anymore. But it's only in recent history that they have something introduced that can help vampires fight their instinctual urges, the urges that they couldn't fight previously. So only recently in history are they actually able to not kill people. So it's complicated what's going on, the social structure between the vampires and the humans. And naturally, that means that Taya is going to be forced to work with a vampire. A negative for me so far is the prose. So I did read Daniel's debut novella, Rebel's Creed, and I did enjoy it, but my biggest negative for it was the prose. And I didn't read the sequel to that, but now I'm reading Neon Ghosts. And again, it's just, I think that that's one place that there's a lot of room for improvement in the prose, in the dialogue, in just making things feel really smooth and natural and not so clunky. There are also a couple of world building elements specifically around the vampires that I'm kind of looking at. I'm like watching, I'm waiting to see, because I'm like, how are you going to make this work? You're going to need to tell me more to make me believe how this all fits together. So there are a couple of, while the world building is the best part about the book so far, the world building is also the part about the book that I'm watching it. I'm watching it because there's a couple of questions that I have, but he's done such a good job of not info dumping, but of incorporating this really fascinating and detailed world into the story really, really well. I mean, just genuinely, his world building so far has been really strong. So I'm curious to see how he takes it, because so far the world building has been very strong, and the things that I am side-eyeing, I'm just curious to see if it works out, or if we'll see how it goes. Final thing that I'm really enjoying so far is the exploration of grief, or the hold that trauma can have on someone. So Taya has a history, and she's holding on to some very strong trauma, and that manifests in her work. It can affect her relationships, particularly we've seen it come up with her best friend, and so far that's been very organic, and it has felt, it's been a strong emotional component that I think is really necessary for a story that otherwise the dialogue has made me feel more distanced from the characters, but this managing of grief is helping to bring me a lot closer. This is Cyrus, by the way. He found us and has chosen us, and he's been living with us for a few days now. Locke hates him, but he's very slowly accepting his fate that he now has a brother. We still keep them apart most of the time, but Locke is slowly accepting him, or not trying to attack him anymore, at least. Anyway, Neon Ghosts so far, it's a pretty strong start. I have my things that I'm side-eyeing, I have my qualms, but for the most part, it's at least has me very interested. Golly, Cyrus! I forgot to say I'm 125 pages into Neon Ghost, so I've got plenty more to read. So it's a very interesting start. Welcome to the vlog. Hello, an update on cat, and then an update on book, because I know what the priorities are. So Cyrus has officially been adopted by our family. He showed up at our house days ago. I brought him back to his house because I know where he lives, and they told me that they took him in after his owners abandoned him, and they were just caring for him because they're nice people, but not necessarily because they wanted to. But you know, I returned their cat. End of story. Then he came back to us, and he's been with us for a few days. So I went back over to the owner's house again, because he absolutely refuses to leave. So I went back over to his owners again. They're an elderly couple, and I said, do you want me to bring your cat back, or do you want him to just stay with us? Because they had previously told me that they were just trying to be nice, not necessarily looking to care for him. And they said, he's had his shots. You can go get him fixed so he can go inside your house. He'd be a great house cat. Enjoy. You want us to get him fixed for you? Do you want us to handle it? Take your cat. Take the cat. They're a really sweet couple, but they were very, very excited that Cyrus had found a home. And my son, oh boy, he was telling us, he was like, I feel like Cyrus is my best friend. So he could not be happier that now he gets to stay. So that's the cat update. We now have 2 cats. Also, I finished reading Neon Ghosts, and there was a note-taking section at the back of the book, which was great because I've written down some notes. So Taya as a protagonist, I think I mentioned in the last clip that she's very much a rookie. I mean, she's just trying to get her license, so we know she's going to be a bit rookie-ish, but she jumps to conclusions, she makes mistakes, she's very much a rookie, and that really stays throughout the book. She's also trying to navigate a very dark world. As I said, this is a dystopian world where it is a different set of rules, and her own mentor is a dirty cop. So yeah, she's faced with a lot of moral quandaries, and she's doing her darndest. She's trying, but also, you know, the darkness is gonna affect anyone. So Taya was an interesting character to follow, and I think that Daniel did a really good job with her character. Just don't go in expecting a hero. I think probably as far as Taya goes, my favorite facet about her all throughout the book is the exploration of the grief that she's dealing with, the loss that happened before the book started, and we enter the book with her in the middle of still working through that trauma. It was a very significant loss in her life, and it's something that she does not... She takes time to work through that stuff. So she's working through it, and not always in the cleanest way. There were scenes that were probably some of my favorite scenes in the book were in exploring her pain and her trauma and working through that. I think that Daniel really just honed in on what needed to be worked through. A complaint is, so this book, as I said, is quite dark. It can be very brutal at times. There are many action scenes, many very brutal action scenes where Taya gets pulverized. And I feel like, as well as Daniel did at exploring the grief in Taya that happened previous book, I wish the new things that were going on with Taya would also affect her in this book. You know, she'd get beat bloody, she'd get stabbed multiple times, and then quickly get a solution to that so that there wasn't much narrative consequence, as well as there really wasn't a lot of emotional consequence throughout several of these fights. You know, she wasn't afraid of being stabbed again. She still just would rush on into danger. And you know, there were a lot of very visceral fights, and I kept kind of waiting for there to be a narrative physical consequence and an emotional consequence, especially in a book where there's so much emotional things happening and being explored. I really wanted the on-page new things to be explored too. And I'm not saying that never happens, especially near the end we finally got some of that, but you know, it's a, what is this, like 600 pages? It's a 500-page-ish book. It should have been more. By the way, everything I tell you in this review, I've already said to Daniel, so if I don't know if he's gonna watch this video, but if he does, none of this is gonna be a surprise. I've told him all my that I loved and didn't love about the book. So on the track of that kind of character work, also the side characters, great side characters, a best friend who challenges Taya and calls her out, and who is kind and giving and forces Taya to confront how selfish she can be and how much she is just constantly asking and not giving nearly enough. Yeah, it's okay. I told you before, a vampiric character that Taya is forced to have close proximity with, other fantastical things going on. And every single character, when they're first introduced to the story, I'm so good. I immediately know them well. I'm intrigued by them. I want to know their story and how their story works together with Taya's. And for several of these side characters, their introduction is strong, but then they really don't keep developing throughout the book, and sometimes they also don't keep being in the book until they're needed. And then here they are, and then they're gone again. Still the same as how I felt 100 and some odd pages in the first check-in I did. Still the same. The world and the grief exploration are the two best parts about this book for me. This world is phenomenal. It's so intriguing, the little bitty details that are all throughout it, without it being info dumpy, without it being like, pause the plot, let's explore the world. It's very cohesive, it's very detailed, it's very alive. I'm very much a settings person. I want my books to have very vivid settings that I feel like I'm stepping into and I can see from every angle, not something that looks kind of cardboard, where it's like, okay, I know what I need to know for the story, but without the story, does the world exist? Oh my goodness, this world might exist more than the story does, and that's not a complaint. That is very much a positive, and it's done in a very cohesive way. I really think that world building wise, this is where Daniel soars as a writer. Actually, I think most of my cons for this book are wrapped up in, I would love for Daniel to have stronger editing in his book. The characterization continuing throughout the story, and the characters not feeling so much like they step in and out according to how the plot needs it to be. There were quite a few plot conveniences that came up, as far as Taya having an obstacle, like being beat up in a fight, or like needing new wear, or needing something, and then a character just stepping in and being like, sure, I'll pay for that, I'll handle that, here, have this thing. And just too many plot conveniences. And Daniel told me that the editor that worked with him on A Witch's Sin worked hard. Like, she did a lot to this book to make it what it is now. So I'm not trying to say anything about the team that Daniel worked on in this book. I just think that he's got so much going for him in this book, and almost all the things that I think are weaker about this book, I think just a stronger editorial fix this would go miles. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. It's fast-paced, it's a really vivid, exciting world. I haven't read a lot of cyberpunk, so I can't say it's unique and groundbreaking. I don't know, but it was really cool. I really like Taya as a character. I have enjoyed her journey, I guess, her arc, what she's gone through and what it's made of her. There are several things that I'm looking at as far as the social structure. There were a couple of things in the social structure, actually, that I was like, hey, Daniel, this doesn't work. And he kind of told me what his plans were for the future, so I'm looking forward to seeing him make it all work. And the complaints that I have about the side characters, about plot conveniences, about that sort of stuff, I think this is all stuff that, just shows that Daniel is still a young writer, and that I think he's gonna be able to improve. So I really enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun with this. This was a really fun book with its list of cons, but I'm excited to see what the next book brings and continue to see him improve. Oh, I also read The Promised Neverland. Okay, so I'm still reading Dragon Ball Z. I've read 2 more volumes this week, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give updates every other, because I'm also actively reading The Promised Neverland now. So this week I'm going to talk to you about the first arc of Promised Neverland. I'm going to do it the same way as I normally do, where the spoiler panels will be on the screen to accompany my non-spoiler thoughts. So if you want a spoiler-free thoughts about The Promised Neverland, you're good. It's still here. Just don't look at the screen. And then next week, I'll talk to you more about Dragon Ball Z. That just helps me to be able to bulk up, so that I'm actively reading both, but that way I can talk to you about more than just a volume or 2 at a time. So, The Promised Neverland it's gotten off to such a strong start to me. It starts off in this orphanage, following particularly one character who is one of the oldest, one of the 3 oldest ones in the orphanage. She's 11 years old, and you only stay in this orphanage until you're 12, and then you get a foster family if you haven't yet, but you can also get a foster family earlier. It just, it happens when it happens. So she helps care for the youngers, and there's 37 of them in all, and they have a really happy life. They call their caregiver, or their caretaker, they call her mom. It's just it's a really wholesome, lovely setting, until it's not, until they find the girl that just went off to her foster family. They find her dead, and not just that, but find out that there's a lot going on behind the scenes with all the kids that are supposedly leaving. There's other things going on. So it gets dark fast, and it turns out that all of their fate is pretty much going to go exactly the way that this other kid's fate went. So they need to get out. But along with that, there's other mysteries that are introduced. There's other elements that you wouldn't expect. That's like, okay, well, what does that mean though? Why is it that way? And other obstacles, when you would think them being able to get out could be fairly simple, but there's very specific obstacles that make it really tricky for them to figure out how to do it. And the older kids don't just want to get out on their own. They want to make sure that all the kids can get out safely. So it's this big complicated adventure, and they're trying to figure it out after the first arc. I've only done the introduction arc. Again, I've also read 2 volumes of Dragon Ball Z, but I will continue to read more next week, and we'll talk about a bigger chunk of it next week. But the introduction arc of The Promised Neverland is going very well for me, and I'm very excited to talk to you about it more in 2 weeks. But anyway, that's everything that I read this week. I read Neon Ghosts, which took up most of my week, and I read some Promised Neverland, and I adopted a cat. Or he adopted us, honestly. That's kind of the way that went. I post videos every Tuesday and Thursday on this channel, Mondays and Fridays on my other channel, which is always linked in the description. Be sure to chat with me more in the comments. I'll see you again soon. Bye.